Phil Spencer has a rich history of hiding things in the background, and I think he just did it again. Back when the Xbox Series S wasn't really known, Phil Spencer pulled a fast one on many people, myself included, where he was able to put the Xbox Series S in the background of an interview remember, this is before it was announced, and nobody really caught it. And it looks like Phil maybe did it again, but we don't really know if this was intentional or unintentional. So Microsoft had previously announced that they were building a streaming device for Xbox Game Cloud Ultimate, whatever, Xbox, their cloud streaming service. Now, they have also come out and said, well, we're not quite sure if we're going to ship this thing or it's delayed or whatever else, and we never actually officially saw it. Until probably today. It looks like Phil Spencer, who has a shelf of many things behind him, was talking about Fallout, or Vault Boy, I should say. And, well, if you look in that top corner next to that Elite controller, you see a little white box. And that little white box looks a lot like an Xbox Series S. And you might be saying, Brad, that's just a Series S, it's skewed or whatever, and that's not the streaming box. But if you look at it in relationship to the size of that Elite controller, you can tell that is not your ordinary Series S. So let's just blow this thing up a little bit. Giant red arrow in case you can't see it. And guys, I think that Phil actually has this thing on his shelf and probably just forgot about it and tweeted this thing out to show off his collection, not really thinking much of it. But you can very clearly see that is likely the streaming box that Microsoft was working on. Now, there's more information here that's readily apparent because Microsoft regionally, when they announced that they were working on this thing, keep in mind, they've already announced that they are working on this thing, they told the press and the media it was not a dongle. And if you're looking at this does not look like a dongle. If you look at it, it looks like a mini Series S. There's no big shock there. But if you look at that little black spot on the right side, I bet that that's probably an IR port, or that would be my guess. Potentially, I guess it could be some sort of a USB charging or something like that, but it might be an IR port or something along those lines to allow that native. Remember, I think one of the appealing things about this was that it wasn't going to be Bluetooth, at least per my understanding at the time, and that they were actually going to use the native Xbox protocol. And so that might be a way that Microsoft was going to do that. Either way, this is like one of those fascinating looks because this is hardware that Microsoft has not announced. Very clearly, I think everybody, myself included, thinks that this likely is the streaming box. The question becomes, is Microsoft going to ship this thing? Well, we're starting to see other cloud, we'll call them cloud native devices. The Logitech G Cloud is one of the more apparent things that have recently been announced, and this device would fall right into that category, which really brings up an interesting question. If you have vendors who are willing to take the hardware risk, remember, hardware is expensive to not only just build, produce, ship, and then put on the retail shelf, it is just expensive in general. If your partners are willing to do this, and they can do it pretty well, should Microsoft even be building their own first party? Be like, look, if you want the experience, go buy our consoles. That is the best way to do it. If you don't, you've got a smattering of options from our vendors, not to mention Samsung itself is building this functionality into the TVs, and so maybe it just doesn't really make sense for Microsoft to build and ship this thing, or they're maybe waiting for some pricing to come down or some better technology. But either way, I think that this is probably pretty genuine. Granted, I've never actually seen the streaming box. We've only heard Microsoft talk about it, but considering this is Phil Spencer's shelves, I don't think there's any reason to think that it's not the device. I guess it could be some sort of novelty that was made, but the reason why I hesitate is that it doesn't really, it looks like it's its own unique thing, and based on that size, it looks like it's roughly, I mean, if you look at it again in comparison to that controller, it looks like it's roughly the width of an Xbox controller, which is quite a bit wider than, say, a TV dongle, and it's also quite a bit smaller than of an Xbox Series S. I don't think that this is some sort of Xbox Series S refresh. I mean, we all know the S likely means small boy. I'm just kidding. I'm making that up. Small. But it does. I mean, what do you guys think? To me, this has got to be it. And so considering that Phil has done it here, and he likely did it on accident here, I don't think anybody's questioning if this is a genuine product. The question becomes, like, what's the price point that this thing would sell at that would actually make sense? And I think that this is the ultimate sort of downfall. To me, the device would have to be like $29 to make any sort of sense, because if you're a household that doesn't have a streaming box or a way to access this, you not only need the box, but then you also need the controller. And the controllers are, I saw them on Amazon for about $40, but they range much higher than that, and then all the way up to the Elite Series 2, which is like $179. But if you're buying the Elite, you're probably not buying the streaming box for obvious reasons. The question becomes, what would Microsoft sell this for, and is this thing ever actually going to ship? They've already delayed it, and they've already come out publicly and said, we're not going to do this. So this may be our only look at it. Now, I did tweet at Phil Spencer, was like, hey, buddy, what's in the box? And so we'll see if he does respond, or if they call out, and it'll be my luck that it'll come out and be like, oh, that's actually just an Xbox Series S Pez dispenser that we built, and it's nothing to really be whatever excited about. That being said, I don't think it is. I think most people on the Twitters right now are blowing up with the concept that this is, in fact, actually the device. So, if Microsoft theoretically did ship this, would you be willing to buy it? I personally don't know if I would. Not because I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good device, but from my perspective, I already have a Series X. I already have multiple PCs that can connect to the internet and browsing. And so for me, like, I'm not the ideal use scenario. Like, I'm not the ideal user. It's not really targeted at somebody like me. Now, somebody who just wants some casual gaming, yeah, it could be, but then Microsoft again is trying to get people into the Game Pass subscription, and so maybe this would be an enticing way to do that sort of thing, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the video about Xbox Game Pass and its revenue, you can click up here, because for $2.9 billion, that's how much Microsoft made in revenue from Game Pass on the console, which they are obviously looking to grow, which this device would feed into that narrative if Microsoft was trying to really boost those numbers up. As of right now, we know they were trying to put about $70 billion, give or take, depending on how you're rounding, into Activision to upgrade the catalog, if you will, and so they control that narrative as they continue to try to push that through the regulatory bodies, which hopefully we will be hearing about soon. So, would this device be appealing to the mass audience? I go back and forth, because you can look at the other device down there in this same picture, the G Cloud. The G Cloud is very similar to what Microsoft was trying to build with the streaming box, but it's mobile. Now, granted, the G Cloud doesn't have 5G. I don't think it has wired Ethernet. I'm assuming that the streaming box would have wired internet, and then you'd have the native integration with the Xbox controller, and so then you'd probably likely have some small chips in there running the Xbox dashboard or the PWA. Actually, now that I think about it, that's how they're doing it on the G Cloud. So they're probably running the PWA, so you got a lightweight compute unit in there. And so, hardware perspective, actually, besides the screen, it might be very, very, very similar once you kind of peel back the onion about what is actually powering all of these devices. So, there you go. No baloney there. That is what we believe to be the streaming box that Microsoft is working on for Xbox. And as Microsoft shares more information about this, obviously, if they ever do, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.